This week on the Eldritch Lorecast. I already forgot the other part.
The word agency is one makes me feel a little twitchy.
People were losing their minds over damage on a miss because it broke their immersion. And now it feels like it hasn't even made a twitch online.
2 months later, they made what I think was the biggest blunder in D&D history.
If only we had a lazy dungeon master here.
With opinions.
You do have a player. I'm not going to call this player problematic. I'm going to call this player challenging.
Stig Asmussen from Giant Skull.
Are you bearing the lead here?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, they're going to do Baldur's Gate 4.
All that and more right now.
Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 tabletop RPG podcast in all the realms, bar none. Also happens to be number 2, 3, and 4 as well. That's right. The gauntlet is being thrown down. My name's Ben Byrne, and I am joined, as always, by Shawn Merwin, James Hake, and this week, Sly Flourish himself, Mike Shea, filling in for Dale. Mike, welcome back.
Hello.
Welcome back to the Lorecast.
Welcome back. Thank you. It's awesome to be here.
It's been almost 3 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Since you've been, almost to the date, actually.
We've managed to keep him away this long.
I know.
But no
and I
longer.
finally snuck my way back in here.
Mike, I have to ask, though, it has been 2 years since we kind of began the journey, if you will, through the OGL experience, through the play tests of the next D&D, one D&D, if you will, at the time.
If you will.
The books are out. It's been 6 months since the launch of the last of the 3 core books for D&D 2024. What do you think? What's the prognosis? What's the diagnosis?
I think it's a net positive.
Okay.
My take was like, well, there's really kind of 4 possibilities. It'll totally suck. It'll be not as good. It'll be slightly better, or it'll be amazing, right? Those are kind of the 4. And the likelihood of the outer extremes of that seemed unlikely to me, right? It didn't seem very likely that it would totally tank or totally be awesome. And I was like, the best I can hope for is that it's better, right? And I have everyone's got lots of issues. And I certainly hold nobody's wrong for disagreeing with me on it. But for me, having run it, I've run it a fair bit, right? I've been running it for a couple of groups. I've played characters in it, and now I'm running high level, like 16th level stuff. And overall, I'm happier with it.
Okay, that's good. James Hake, have you had much of a chance to run 5e 2024?
Yeah, I've not to run it, but I've played in 2 campaigns of it, and these campaigns are very strict about their following of it. They're not even including, you can't use spells or subclasses from early 5e. So I'm getting a very unadulterated new 5e experience. And you know what? I like it. I like the weapon masteries. I like the way that ability scores are tied to background. I've got a bone to pick with the way that the hide action works, but yeah, my nitpicks are...
Does the hide action work? Sorry. Hang on. That's another conversation.
We'll talk about that one later. But yeah, it's D&D. And we can talk about whether or not the change was worth it, but I like it.
I haven't played enough to know. I have worked in it more probably than anyone else who didn't design it, but I haven't played it enough. The campaign that I've been playing meets maybe once every 2 or 3 months. So I've probably gotten 6 play sessions, and I've probably run 2 low-level games of it, and that's been it. So I trust other people when they tell me that everything still works. I just not have seen the proof myself. I have lots of opinions on the layout. I have lots of opinions on
editing,
the wording
right.
for it. But that's a completely different thing than does the game itself work. We're going to go forward to the next question. Looking back at the Open Gaming License and what it has meant to where we are now. And Mike, you were on 3 years ago.
Yeah.
You went back and rewatched that show recently and had some thoughts that you wanted to talk about. So why don't you tell us sort of what brought you back here?
Yeah. So it was fun. Like what originally brought me, I heard when you guys did the quiz episode, one of the quiz questions was somewhere along the lines of like, how did Mike Shea managed to bash Shawn Merwin so bad? And I was like, bash Shawn Merwin? He's my hero. Why would I ever bash Shawn Merwin? I never bashed Shawn Merwin. I gotta go listen to this and see what I said about Shawn Merwin. And so that got me started listening to the episode, at which I quickly forgot about whether I bashed you or not, and got far more interested in like the conversations we're having. And it didn't occur to me till like halfway through listening that this was before the OGL, right? And it was kind of right before the OGL. It was like 2 months before. It was October, I think, right? And the OGL thing started to happen at the end of December. Mm-hmm. And it was really fascinating to me to hear it. We were deep into 1D&D. We were deep into talking about the play tests of stuff that was going on. We were, and one of the things that I thought was kind of interesting is I had gotten, after, kind of before and after the OGL thing happened, I had gotten feedback and some criticism from folks that really liked the work that I did. That said, like, all you do now is talk about, the OGL catastrophe, and all you do is now bash Wizards. And I was like, I don't know that I've gotten any harder on Wizards. And I was like, I was pretty hard on Wizards, and we all were pretty critical of the things that were going on back then in that episode. And I think, like, if you were record if we, weren't talking about the OGL in this one, I bet we would sound pretty similar to what we sounded like back then, even today. Like, I think, already we were questioning things like, do we need to even have this 1D&D thing? Do we even need to have a new version of this? What does this all mean? And then looking at the actual playtest documents and asking, I think we'd be asking those same questions now. But it was really, to me, like that sort of, the fascinating days before the OGL happened. And of course, the one thing where I got to write that, I was like in the mall taking a walk, listening on my headphones, and I had to stop and write down your quote.
Never underestimate the power of corporate greed.
And I was like, oh my God, Shawn knows something. And you clarified that no, you didn't know anything. But I was like, wow, that was like really prophetic, considering that 2 months later, they made what I think was the biggest blunder in D&D history.
The funny thing was, Teos and I had been talking for probably a year before that about Wizards' plans and how they wanted to make D&D a billion dollar brand like Magic had become.
Right.
And all, we looked at where could they do this. It's not going to come from book sales, because as great as much as the game grew,
no, you'll never, right.
You're never going to get that.
Yeah.
So where were they going to get this from? And all we could think of was these $1 million, $2 million, $4 million Kickstarters that were using the open gaming license to create the content.
Get $1 billion out of that.
Right. Well, you're still not going to, but at least
if you had 10% of $1 million Kickstarter, you'd need what? 10,000 of them to get to $1 billion. At least
if you're the CPO, whatever CPA sitting there doing the books, well, at least we're going to get closer. At least we can show our shareholders, look, this is our plan to make another $20 million over 5 years or something. And so we were saying they're going to have to do something like that if they want to reach this goal. So it wasn't like crystal ball sort of stuff. It was just understanding the business side of things.
Turned out not to be a great plan.
The first time I ever heard the phrase from a Hasbro suit, we're going to make D&D $1 million brand.
$1 million isn't exactly a lot of money these days.
$1 billion
Brand, yes.
Yeah.
Is at the dawn of 4th edition.
Yeah, exactly.
And it seems like they're 2 for 2.
Right. I did a little segment on what I guess, according to Ben, is the 7th or 8th most popular RPG talk show this past Sunday, where I compared the Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy VII release to the D&D 2014 Player's Handbook. And by my rough estimation, it took, and I had a couple of people, including our, Teo Sabadia had some data on this on his website and a little bit more. They could have sold on the outside $200 million worth of 2014 Player's Handbooks in 10 years. They sold $200 million of Final Fantasy Magic the Gathering sets in one day, right? I looked at that. I'm like, you're never going to, if the only way to get these two brands to be equal in the amount of money they're making is for Magic to die. Right? Like, you have to bring Magic down to the point where D&D can catch up. There's no way you're going to have both of these be an equal brand when one is selling 2,700 times more product, getting 2,700 times more revenue than the other, just from comparing those two sets. The most popular D&D book of all time sold 4 million copies and made about $200 million in gross revenue in 10 years. Again, that's an overestimation. It's probably less than that compared to one Magic the Gathering set that made $200 million. According to Chris Cox, the CEO, quoted that he said they made $200 million in one day.
A role-playing game is not a collectible card game, right? Like the business model is so different.
I got that argument a lot, right? That you cannot compare Magic cards to D&D, except they did, right? Because they're like, we want both of these to be billion-dollar brands, and you're like,
I wouldn't say they compared them, except for the fact that they just want them both to be the same in terms of revenue. in terms of revenue,
I know, but that still feels like
you could say McDonald's wants to sell burgers,
right. The other argument I'll make though, and that I did make on this, not to just kind of reiterate the same stuff, but like they had Chris Kao, who did a lot with electronic gaming, was over on the Magic the Gathering side and was there. You never want to like attribute to a senior level executive success of anything, right? We all know this, but he was there when Magic Arena came out. Right. And Magic Arena was like a giant wood chipper that spewed money out. Right. It was this incredible, we get to sell the cards that we printed and now we can sell them digitally for a ton of money. And it was very successful. And they moved him over to D&D to do the same thing in D&D, in which case it was Sigil. Right. And now we have seen what happened with Sigil. Again, getting back to that like 4th edition, the last time they wanted to be $1 billion brand was when they were saying, hey, we should do this with 4th edition. It just did it again, right? And it was the same guy, right? It was the guy that was on Magic that went over to D&D. They brought Jess Lanzillo, right? She was an executive that was over on Magic, then came over to D&D. So they're sharing the people, right? Even if I'm sure if you talk to anybody in Wizards, they're like, of course, the business model for Magic and the business model for D&D are totally separate kind of things.
Sure.
But inside of one company, there's still two pillars, and one is way bigger than the other. And I don't think there's any way to ever normalize those.
I think the experience that the average gamer will experience when it comes to comparing Magic and D&D is grousing to Wizards about blind box pre-painted miniatures, right? It's like that's their booster pack for D&D.
Yeah.
And they're so fundamentally unimportant to the play of the game compared to a booster pack in Magic that you're still never going to get it. The only thing they can do is monetize accessories, because if you try and split the player's handbook into booster packs, there's going to be an angry mob in
Right. Well, they did. So Teos brings up that like back in the 4th edition days, they had these sealed card decks with random cards in that you could like bring to your local 4E game, and you would have some crazy power that your GM hated because you bought this $4 pack of cards at the local game shop. And I think that was like no one remembers it. Teos remembers it and brings it up. I'm like, oh God, that's right. I do remember they had this thing. So they've tried little things like this, right? They because it's the best model, right? That's a killer model. Like it's a killer business model. Scipio, by the way, good friend of all of ours, Scipio brings up that like Arena accounts for about 20% of the Magic revenue. I have a Magic number in my head that I swear I heard somewhere, but I don't have any data, that when Arena came out, Magic doubled in one quarter around the time that Arena showed up. And I don't know that they said it was because of Arena. It could have been because of a good release of something else too. But boy, there was a sharp spike. And we know that Arena's, 20% still 20%.
Michael in chat brings up an interesting point, which is a Daggerheart now has character class packs of the domain cards needed for those characters, right? The core box of Daggerheart ships with all the character card domains that you need to play. But because the domains overlap a little bit, if you've got, for example, a Guardian and a Seraph in the same party, you're going to need an extra set of Valor cards if you want them to, share Body Bash or whatever, or print their own card. They have a free card maker online.
I was going to say, they actually not only can you buy unrandomized, I mean, they're having a Kickstarter soon, right? For non-randomized packs of this, but you can also download them for free. Imagine if you could go download printable versions of the Black Lotus for Magic the Gathering. That would be, I'll take one, right?
Right. I mean, you can.
You can, right? But I don't think I can go to a tournament and use it.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of this speaks to, in my mind, when you brought up Sigil earlier, and we look at like, how do you try to monetize something like Dungeons and Dragons, a role-playing game, and then we talk about, the 4E attempt, 4E, that sounded really weird, 4E attempt at trying to create booster packs for the game. I think that role-playing games are kind of innately very difficult to monetize and very difficult to figure out how to attract an audience to your monetization methods. And I think that Sigil speaks to this in a way that it's like my perception of it as someone who has no idea because I was completely on the outside. But it was like, there's all these other VTTs out there. There's Foundry, there's Fantasy Grounds, there's Roll20. Wizards of the Coast perhaps felt a pressure to be like, all right, we are going to not just create a VTT, we're going to create the VTT, the greatest VTT, right. Something nobody's ever seen, but it's going to outstrip every other VTT.
Yeah.
And then quickly discovered, A, that's the most expensive way to do it. B, it's the clunkiest way to do it. And C, it's not actually necessarily the same as like blind box miniatures, what the audience want. And now they're kind of doubling down on D&D Beyond Maps, right. Which feels like...
Good for them having that, yeah.
Well, it just feels like a happy accident. You know, I remember when Maps came out, it was like, what? I thought Sigil was their thing, but now they got this thing? All right, I mean, cool. Like this seems okay. And it's probably, I mean, I don't have any numbers in front of me to suggest how many people are using it, but it seems much more... Yeah, well, exactly, right? And it feels like it's much more the thing they could have been focusing on from the start. And I guess the point that I would make is like I probably would have made the same mistake, you know, as WotC.
I'll give WotC credit for two things. One is you can imagine a CEO sitting there being like, wait a minute, we're investing in two different virtual tabletops? No, Sigil is the one. Get rid of that other one. We don't want to invest any money in this other one that's just the normal one. We should put everything into this, and killing the one that actually worked. So good on them for saying, no, we're actually going to go ahead and support two of them. And we'll have a very lightweight one that's in a browser. That's where we started with a minimum viable product and worked our way up, and people like it, right? It's pretty good. And I also don't necessarily blame them for trying Sigil for exactly the reasons you brought up, which is like, let's have a VTT that's actually very different from Roll20 and from Foundry and from Fantasy Grounds and these other ones. There's only one other VTT that I know of, which was
Tailspire.
Yeah. So just another 3D one that was called Tailspire. And so good on them for at least trying this thing. And then it might have been, I'm granted, like firing 30 people sucks, right? No one wants to see that.
Sure, of course.
But maybe them pulling the plug when they did was actually the right move, right? Because like, I mean, I looked at it and immediately was like, you're never going to have major market penetration with this because you're requiring giant workstations from everybody to play. Just that alone, whatever else it could do, requiring big ass GPUs from all your players and all it takes is one player not being able to play with that for the whole group saying, well, I guess we can't use it, right? Or kicking that guy out. And that's not very good.
If they can get it so that it goes on the PS5 and you can have, an entirely digital gaming group, that's great. But if you've got to have your laptops out around the gaming table, like they had in the advertisement, and they've got to be the highest end laptop you can get. I know my laptop can't run Sigil.
Right, mine can't either.
What's the point?
I think we completely pivoted from the OGL side of this thing, though.
We did. I mean, I lost the thread of this conversation when my internet kicked me out. So I'm swimming.
I'm sure somebody out there really wants to hear us talk all more about the OGL catastrophe.
Well, I actually wanted to take it back to talk about the 5e 2024, the system, right? Because I've been running a campaign. It hasn't been a ton of sessions yet, but I have bumped up a couple of times and been like, oh, that's new. Oh, that works differently to how it did before. Yeah. And so far, every time I've had one of those crop up, I think it has been largely better. Like, oh, I think this is working out smoother, better, a better experience for the player from my perception from behind the GM screen. The one thing I haven't seen, because I have a party of 3 who are all casters, weapon masteries are okay. Is that question mark? Is that do we like them in the end? That seemed to be the real firebrand kind of question around 2024.
Weapon masteries, they're tied to a weapon and they're tied to a class. You get to be able to use them. And there are some that are really nice. I'm playing a fighter that's got a great sword. Being able to deal strength modifier damage on a miss feels nice.
Okay.
It's funny to say that because 10 years ago, that was an enormous D&D Next sticking point. People were losing their minds over damage on a miss because it broke their immersion. And now it feels like it hasn't even made a twitch online. It's great. But I think one thing that weapon masteries do have as a point against them is that it's just an extra thing to remember every time you hit. And some of these things are pretty heavy, like Vex with my short bow. Like you hit, and what is it? You have advantage on the next.
You get advantage on the next shot,
your next turn. It's kind of a lot to remember, and it kind of feels like it's really powerful, also. And so I feel like the balance of these mastery properties, both in terms of like CPU balance on the player and the GM, and just the balance of the power itself. It feels a little all over the place. I would recommend doing this thing that I wrote for Kobold Press some 8 years ago called Beyond Damage Dice, which was essentially exactly this, but in a slightly more limited capacity.
So Tales of the Valiant has weapon mastery kind of things baked into Tales of the Valiant. Have you looked at those, and did those mirror what you had written for them previously?
No, I got to say I haven't looked at it.
Oh, okay. So the interesting thing they do is you can do these sort of weapon mastery things, but they are as opposed to damage.
Yeah.
So you give up your damage in order to do
there was plenty
the
of stuff
weapon
in Beyond
mastery
Damage Dice just like that, and that was my main.
So I was wondering if they got some of those ideas. Yeah, I wonder if they got it, and that has been. And then some classes have some abilities that do let them do those things, like as a bonus action.
Yeah.
So I have a Tales of the Valiant game that I'm running in parallel to my what I'm calling my 3x5e game, because I have 3 different versions of 5e being played in the same game. We have 2014 characters, 2024 characters, and Level Up Advanced 5e characters, all mashed together in the same game, and it's awesome because it's like, people are like, do I drink a potion as a bonus section? And I'm like, what kind of character you're playing? And they're like, 2014. I'm like, no, for you, it's an action. And then the guy's like, what about me? And I'm like, what are you playing? It's like Level Up Advanced 5e. I'm like, do you have that ability that lets you drink it as a bonus action? He's like, I do. I'm like, then it's a bonus action. And then the other guy's like, what about me? I'm like, you're 2024, so you could just drink it as a bonus action. Absolutely.
Oh, that's
and so we literally have like different rule slices for each one. And the one that really jacked everybody up was fireballs, because we have the Level Up Advanced 5e wizard does a 66 fireball, and the 2024 cleric does an 8d6 fireball because he's he's like, why is this fireball 25% better than mine? I'm a wizard. So it's really fun. The one thing about the weapon masteries that you brought up, though, is one thing I did not realize until I was playing is a fair bit of the weapon masteries are really only on the player side, and I don't even know that they're doing them. So like, we have a rogue in my group, and he is doing a lot of vexing in ways that he does it, and he doesn't even tell me, right? He just says, did I hit? Okay, I know I vex, and I know the next attack's with advantage. And every so often I'll look over and see that he rolled advantage on an attack, and I don't know why. And I'll say, how did you have advantage? He goes, I vexed it last turn. I go, oh, okay, cool, right? And so it was like, it was on it. But I'll also say, like, the more kind of complications that go into the players' heads because of this, the easier my job as a DM becomes. So maybe I'm okay with it because, it fuzzes up their brains, and that gives me a bit of an advantage at the table. The one mastery that I have not seen played out a lot, that was the one that worried me the most, was Topple. And that's the idea that you're pushing saving throws a lot. And when you knock something prone, that is a really big effect, particularly on boss monsters. So I was worried about Topple the same way I was worried about monks being able to chain stunning strikes in 2014 and burn down all the legendary resistances of a legendary monster by forcing a big pile of saves. A high level fighter with a Topple weapon can force 6 saving throws against a monster, with every single hit to try to knock them prone. So I haven't seen that play out yet. In my games, I think I've got one character that has the ability to topple, and he doesn't use it very often.
How do we feel about monsters on the flip side of things? Again, I haven't done a lot of battles, but I'm deliberately using 2024 stat blocks just to familiarize myself where everything is on the stat block, so I know where to look when I'm looking for things. But the fights I've run have been relatively small scale. So do they feel like, speaking of weapon masteries, kind of punching up the player characters a bit? Do we feel like the monsters have been punched up in correlation with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Shawn and Joey, have you guys used the monsters much?
I have not. I've used them insofar as druid shapeshifting has allowed them, and I've read through them. It's like, oh, there's no more lair actions anymore, or legendary actions. I mean to say,
no, there are legendaries. There aren't lair.
Oh, yes,
they still have legendary actions. Yeah.
A lot of stuff have been rolled into reactions for monsters, is my understanding.
No, so that was something that happened with older monsters, where they had legendary monsters that had lots of reactions that did not make its way into the 2024.
What you're thinking of, James, is the green dragon.
Yes,
like a few pages from the monster manual got released.
Right.
And the
ended up not being the one that was in there. That was not the one that was in there.
Okay.
So I've actually been running, not only have I run it for my 3x5e game, but I've been running it with my 2014 game. So my poor 2014 characters have been facing 2024 monsters. And boy, the threat, I always had that constant complaint that it's hard for me to keep the threat up, particularly with high level characters. I have no trouble with that now. They're getting hammered, right? And I can, the threat is not hard at all. I'd say the only real complaint I've gotten is from players who really hate spellcasters who are doing non-spell, spell-like attacks, and they can't counterspell them. And I, of course, hate counterspell. So my initial reaction is like, I don't care. But then, you know, they get really upset because they're like, for them, it breaks the immersion, right? If they're like, wait a minute, this, you know, Lich is hammering us with 4 blasts, but they don't count as a spell. So, you know, Globe of Vulnerability won't help us. Our, you know, resistance to spell-like abilities doesn't help us. Our ability to make saving throws and reduce the damage if we make our save, that doesn't work, and counterspell doesn't work. And so, like, why do we have all of these abilities to help defend us against spells when we're fighting a Lich who literally is just shooting us with a magic crossbow as far as we're concerned? And, you know, but on the DM side, I'm like, man, it's so much easier for me to do those attacks, right? That's like rolling a bunch of attack rolls and throwing a bunch of damage around is way easier for me than figuring out like how to line them up for, you know, Cone of Cold, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
In the campaign that I was playing, it's a 2014 campaign. We were using 2024 characters, and the monster book hadn't come out yet, but I had some access. So I was slipping the game master the 2024 monsters to use if there was an analogous monster. It was so easy to see that, oh, okay, he's attacking us now with a 2014 monster. Yeah. Now he's attacking us with a 2024 monster.
Yeah,
you can absolutely see the difference as the player.
And is the difference only in like the lethality, or is there a difference in the way it feels at the table?
I mean, for me, it's pure raw damage output, but I am not a tactical DM. Like I've never been into the like, try to maximize every interesting sort of tabletop action that a monster has. I just want them to hammer damage out. I mean, like Forge of Foes, you know, Teos and Scott Gray and I all wrote this book, Forge of Foes, and we have like a monster stats by CR table in there. And I was using that where I didn't give them any abilities. I was just like, they have hit points and they do damage, right? And, you know, and they do a lot of damage. And so for me, that book, you know, that book handled a lot. I will say the Tales of the Valiant Monster Vault also has a big jump in output and damage output. And they hung on to that style of having like the Cult Fanatic has like, you know, Eldritch blasts that they're hammering with that do a lot of damage instead of the old school, like stab them with a dagger. But one thing I really like about the 2025 Monster Manual is there really are a lot of extra monsters in there, right? Like it's got way more monsters than any core monster book that I've seen. And that matters to me, right? Like there's I think there's at least 7 cult fanatic or 7 different kinds of cultists, right? There's 4 different CR8 cultists, for crying out loud, which is a little bit more than I think you need. But there's like so many different monsters that are not typically available in other monster books. Like the Tales of the Valiant Monster Vault is great, but it doesn't have nearly as many monsters in it as the 2025 Monster Manual does. And they're both compatible, right? So I can just sort of pick the one that's got more monsters and use them.
It does 2 things. First of all, I think the monsters are like, I'm not the raw damage DM. I'm the like, what is the special ability that makes this monster feel like this monster, which there are more of, and I appreciate. But also having more stat blocks of the same like type of monster, like the cultists you brought up, the ghouls, there's different liches, the 2 different
ghoul
death
necrophage,
knights,
right? Like it's got a spellcasting ghoul in it. Like that's pretty cool.
Well, it just allows you to build thematic encounters with varied monsters of the same group and doesn't feel like you need to create a menagerie or a zoo of different monsters to be able to create varied feeling encounters, which I really appreciate. Joey, you look like you're looking through something.
And it ties into what you're talking about here really well with the unique special abilities of each of these monsters. When I was looking at the 2014 Monster Manual for the very first time, one of the abilities that leapt out at me was the Hobgoblin's Martial Advantage, which basically is like a sneak attack. It's like a fightery sneak attack where it gives them an extra 2d6 when they have an ally adjacent to you, or when you and the ally are adjacent. I think it's when you've got 2 hobgoblins, one of them being you next to a guy. You hit him, you deal extra damage. And interestingly enough, they've done a lot of cool stuff with hobgoblins. I like hobgoblins. They're one of my favorite monsters because I like big, evil armies to be marching on towns and pillaging.
Sure.
But they've gone and swapped out Martial Advantage for Pack Tactics, which is a fascinating choice. And I think in a total White Room scenario, not a bad swap. I think it's less complicated than Martial Advantage, which I guess is mildly fiddly. If you're trying to make it more new player friendly, this is a decent swap. But it feels like a swap that happened really late in development because of these higher level hobgoblins, you have things like the Hobgoblin Captain and Warlord. And check this out. Hobgoblin Captain, while in a 10-foot emanation or originating from the Hobgoblin, it and its allies have advantage on attack rolls and saving throws. So what's the point of pack tactics if it gives you advantage on attacks when you've got another ally next to the guy? Yeah. It's total overlap, which that to me feels like an error of playtesting. A change came down the pike late in development, and no one had the chance to get it in front of anyone before it had to go to print.
Yeah, they really, right. Not playtesting the monster manual, I think, kind of sucked. There was another interesting one that I think you might appreciate that was similar to this, which where they have this really cool one. They have a creature called a Death Knight Aspirant, right? Which is a lower level Death Knight. So, cool. The problem is the Death Knight had been typically pretty locked at a high CR, and the first time you got to fight him, you'd have to be tier 3 or 4. But it's got this thing that says Martial Undead. Undead creatures of the aspirant's choice, including itself in a 60-foot emanation originating from it, have advantage on attack rolls and saving throws. So I ran a battle where they were tier 4, I think, or tier 3, late tier 3. And I had a Death Knight and 3 Death Knight aspirants. And I was like, if I use that, I'm going to kill the characters. Because every one of these guys would have advantage all the time, right? Like, and they do piles of damage. They make, 3 different attacks. The Death Knight itself is doing a whole bunch of attacks. And I was like, it's too much, right? Like giving advantage to every guy on the table was too much.
And it seems like it's supposed to be like, oh, give your skeletons and ghouls.
That's right. It's like, it's that with a bunch of whites. And you're like, okay, that makes sense. But when it's like 3 of these guys together, they're all giving each other advantage.
Yeah.
They're all just hammering.
Yeah.
So that was one where I was like, I had to pull it back. Like, again, high level characters. And they're, these are skilled players with very powerful characters. And I was still like, I can't do it. Like and they were on the edge without it, right? Like I nearly killed them. I don't know if I nearly killed them, but like they were seriously pushed without giving advantage. And I'm like, also my players are going to hate it. Like they're going to be pissed off. If like literally I'm like, hey, look, every single attack is an advantage. And I'm like, can we do anything? No, it's a 60-foot emanation. The room's only 50 feet big. So no, you're hosed.
Ben's calculating. Ben's excited to start murdering its player characters.
It's really,
pretty much.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I guess the one thing that I think the Monster Manual does lack, and I think if it's a trade-off between this and more stat blocks, I'd prefer more stat blocks. But there are other books that have done this well also, which is the idea of like telling you not just what the monster stats are, but how to use them, and to say explicitly a Death Knight Aspirant is intended to fight alongside their skeleton minions.
If they had to write that, I wonder if they would have changed the stat block. Right? Like maybe write the tactics. Go, maybe these tactics are pretty brutal.
Maybe you just say if they are CR, 7 or less or something.
Yeah, right. Yeah, which is perfect. Like give all the skeletons advantage is perfect.
It already
giving
says
each other
excluding itself. Just say excluding Death Knights,
Right. Or CR. Putting a CR. I like the CR limit. The CR limit idea makes sense.
But I think the Monster Manual is lacking a little bit of that flavor text because it feels like it's been squashed out on the page for not even art. Like some of the artwork's gorgeous, but some of it does look a little bit like it's squashed in there.
A little usability thing. So I really like using physical books even in my online games, right? Like I have a little easel that I can put a book on that's got little arms that hold the pages in place while I'm running online games. I just love playing that way. And one thing that the Monster Manual does that almost no other monster book that I've used does, I don't remember if Flea Mortals does this or not, is the stat block is on one page. They never spread a stat block across multiple pages. And that's something that Kobold Press in particular is pretty bad at. Like they spread stat blocks not only across the inner spread of a page, but across, like I'm looking at it and I have to flip the page back for half the stat block, right? So this is one nice thing when you have like a team that is working in, they always say like never work in layout, right? Like never do your production in layout. But one thing that they do when you're doing your production in layout is ensure that a stat block can actually fit inside of a page. So that's a nice little usability feature that
Shawn, I know you wanted to praise the layout of these books at one point, and I want to leave it to you, but I wanted to say first that the Player's Handbook and DMG do something very similar, where a section will usually start and end on the same page. There'll never be these tiny little straggling paragraphs across the gutter. And that's really nice. It's probably most useful in the Monster Manual like that, where stat block doesn't sprawl. But just for readability's sake, even among class features and stuff like that, that's a huge quality of life improvement.
Well, that's why Ghostfire Gaming's secret weapon is Martin, our graphic designer, who is exacting exactly in those issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't think people appreciate just like how difficult graphic design is.
Yeah.
With
stat blocks,
particularly
I
in
can't
relation.
imagine.
Yeah, with stat blocks, with even just like the amount of text, like this pontification upon the nature of the planes in this setting is this many words long, and we want it to ideally, or even the differences between subclass features was something that we looked at with Grim Hollow, and you can see it in the player's handbook is, one subclass, like a champion fighter, has like this amount of text worth of extra things. The Battle Master has 3 pages worth of, I'm being hyperbolic, but it like getting that to fit well together with artwork is a real challenge.
It's funny.
So
I think the
shout out to graphic design.
2024 is the subclass I like the presentation of least because it's so dedicated to being compact.
Sure.
All of its stuff. It's like all those maneuvers are crammed into like a paragraph. When I would really like to see them spread out. Maybe not necessarily like spells, but a little bit more like spells.
I mentioned it before. I wondering whether or not Flea Mortals did this spread, and I'm flipping through it, and I don't see it spreading across pages either. They did a really good job of keeping monsters on the same page for the most part. I think there's some big ones that they had to, but I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether I should admit this or not, but I use OneNote to lay out my DM notes, so I screen grab from PDFs, monster stat blocks, and there's definitely, even now on D&D Beyond, going to D&D Beyond and they sort of auto-format themselves into a single little block, it's easy to quickly screen grab that. Doing it from a Cobalt Pressbook, you got to take 3 different screenshots and then puzzle it back together on the OneNote page. So speaking of things that are difficult to do on computers, making video games is also difficult. As we quickly jump across to the little bit of news that we did have this week, coming from an interview. This was with on The Game Business, which is a website, with John Haidt, the WotC president, and also Stig Asmussen from Giant Skull, which is the video game developer, which is currently working on a D&D video game. There's not honestly really that much news that came out of this. Giant Skull, we talked about this on a previous episode, but as a reminder, they're working on a D&D video game. It'll probably be something closer to like an action adventure game. Stig Asmussen has worked on the Jedi Fallen Order, Jedi Survivor games, and God of War. Not the Norse saga, but the Greek saga, I believe he was part of working on. So we're expecting it to be more of that sort of game from what they're saying, but still wanting to bring what they're calling the essential D&D things, being player agency and choice, consequences for your actions, building a party, which is making me think it might be either kind of like almost like a Mass Effect-y style thing, where it's an action game, you're single controlling, but you have like party followers that you kind of tell what to do maybe. I don't know, we'll see. Dragon Age, the Veil Guard was kind of like that. It felt like an action game, but it had combos and stuff that you could do with your players. Anybody excited for this Giant Skull game?
Are you bearing the lead here?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, they're going to do Baldur's Gate 4.
Yeah, that's right. So I believe it was, of course we're doing Baldur's Gate 4.
Yeah.
So not exactly a hard-hitting piece of news. But no dates, no company, right. I'll tell you one thing that's interesting is, and tying back to the OGL talk from before, a rumor that's going around that I had heard was that one of the kind of triggers for Chris Cox to say that they needed to do something about the OGL was the video game Solasta, right? Solasta is a French video game that used the OGL to make a D&D kind of game. And I think like IGN or somebody had a thing that said, this is the D&D game we deserve, right? Recognizing that it wasn't branded as D&D and never paid any license fee. And the rumor is that Chris Cox saw that and said, what the hell? Like, why, hey, we're working on a license deal with Larian to do Baldur's Gate 3, and here this other company put a game out already that people really love that's a D&D game that doesn't have the D&D brand on it, but is absolutely our rules. So what's interesting about this is the same company is making Solasta 2, and they're going to be using the D&D 2024 system reference document as their thing, and they will almost certainly get that game out before any other D&D 2024 game that's officially licensed gets released. Yeah. And I hadn't played Solasta until recently, and it's like a 16th level game. Like you go way up in the levels, and it was really, really fun. So it's I'm looking forward to the Solasta that's using the 2024 rules. But I think it's kind of interesting how that turned around. Now, obviously at this point, there's no, Chris Cox isn't going to be too mad about it because even, he also, from what I'm understanding, was the one that gave the thumbs up to release not only the 2014 guide in Creative Commons, but also the 2024 guide in Creative Commons. So, they've accepted that stuff like that is going to happen. But I thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah,
I'm just looking at the Solasta Steam page, and literally the start of the description is roll for initiative, take attacks of opportunity,
right.
Manage player location.
Yep.
In fact, actually reading on, turn-based tactical RPG based on the SRD 5.1 rule set.
Yeah.
So they're not trying to file off the serial numbers.
No.
James, you look like you were going to say something a moment ago.
No, not really.
Fair enough. Well, speaking of James Haig, you are currently working on the Ethereal Expanse Dreams of the Drowned God with a team of writers, and that Kickstarter for Dreams of the Drowned God, if you're listening to this on YouTube, will have launched. How's development going from your end, James?
It's going excellent. Right before this Lorecast began, actually, I finished my last Pomodoro timer for the day of working on the second to last chapter of the book, and it's thrilling. I don't know how much I can talk about, but I'm doing some chase mechanics that I think will satisfy you if you are frustrated with the ones in the 2024 rules. They're lightweight and they're breezy and they're very fun, I reckon. We're doing a lot here. We're digging into the lore of the Ethereal Expanse in a way that we never had the chance to in the original Fable, because we were still kind of mapping out all the territory. It's really high adventure all across the plains, all across the Expanse itself. We're digging into a lot of stuff that was teased at in the setting guide that Joe Rasso and the team put out just a little bit ago, that apparently sold out like hotcakes at Gen Con this year. I was thrilled to hear Shawn tell me that. And so, hey, if you're one of the people who helped us sell out the setting guide at Gen Con, we are going to be following up big time for you with this adventure when it comes out.
Well, Shawn or James, because Shawn, I know you've also had a toe in seeing the team being led by Will Doyle, who worked on Rime of the Frost Maiden, Tomb of Annihilation, Wild Beyond the Witchlight, so definitely has pedigree in adventure writing. Plus, of course, James Hake has mentioned Aaron Roberts, Andy Collins, all working on this as well. What's the elevator pitch for this adventure? And where it sits, I suppose, in the broader Ethereal Expanse, if people aren't familiar with the setting.
It is an adventure of plane-destroying proportions. I'll just give you what you'll see on the Kickstarter page. This is a little preview. You'll see it soon enough. It's that imperial activity within the Expanse is causing the fabric of the astral plane to unravel and burst portals into other planes, and all amidst this immediate destruction that you are going around trying to survive, maybe trying to undo, trying to repair the fabric of the planes. There is a sinister magical force at work that is using the titular dreams of the drowned god to advance a sinister occult agenda. So we've got piracy, we've got imperial colonial extraction and exploitation, we've got planes hopping, and it's all turned to 11 in the way that the magic is very, very high. You're sailing on a sea of magical starlight, kind of drifting in the astral plane, but with all of the aesthetics and trappings of high age of sail, cannon fire, and weather gauging, and broadsiding your foes.
And the cool thing I like is you can really turn the different knobs a bit. If you're more into the warfare, you'll be able to focus more on that. If you're more into the mystery that you have to solve behind these problems, you can go that direction. If you're more piracy and fighting the imperial invasion, then you can push a little bit more in that direction. And Will Doyle is an amazing storyteller. I mean, Rime of the Frost Maiden, Tomb of Annihilation, Wildbin, which, like, if any of those tickled your fancy, Will is delivering that level of story, that level of madness, that level of intricacy to this adventure. And so we were so happy to get him to be able to lead this project, and then have James working on it as the creator of the original setting added even more heft to the project.
I just feel very glad I get to do the final 2 chapters of it. Right, it's indicative of the sort of the bird has flown the nest situation, right? Where I gave start to all of this, and then I get to have this nice little homecoming at the end where we get to hammer the climax and bring it all to a happy ending, assuming the players are successful and will not themselves become drowned members of the deep.
Well, it is launching on Kickstarter. As I said, if you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify or anywhere like that, you can click the link up in the corner. You can click the link in the description, and the Kickstarter is now live, has just gone live. And speaking of looking forward to things, I'm sure Sam has looked forward to us answering this email, which Sam has sent to podcast@ghostfiregaming.com, asking, how do you plan stories when running a campaign? Sam is talking about the trade-off between trying to plan only in the short term to let the player choices kind of matter and give them places to go, but feeling like they don't have enough content or end up getting written into a corner. But the problem with planning too far ahead feels like it removes some of that player agency, and that their choices don't matter if you're trying to push them along the length of your story. How do you plan towards satisfying narratives without removing player agency? Is that even the right question?
If only we had a lazy dungeon master here
with opinions,
with opinions and thoughts, who has written extensively on questions exactly like this.
I mean, I think there's an interesting angle on it. So, of course, my feeling is like, I was actually writing about it today, that the idea of, you set your North Star, right? You have an idea where your campaign is generally headed. This would be the elevator pitch of your campaign, like save Barovia from Strahd, right? Save Barovia from the Devil Strahd. And then you bring things very close to the characters and say, like, what's around the characters? And maybe you have like some villains out there, and the villains have goals that they have goals that they're trying to achieve, and they have quests that they're going on to go on those quests. And then you start to let them run free, even if it's in your head. And those villains are doing things, the characters are doing things, the goal is still out there, and they're all colliding together. And you as the GM get to enjoy them all colliding together and watch the stories emerge from all that stuff that's going on. And there are writers who have talked about this. Stephen King writes about this a lot in On Writing, very, very popular book about writing, of the idea of letting the stories emerge as you're writing. There is a problem with sometimes the endings kind of suck when you do that, right? And we have numerous movies and numerous TV shows where we can see like, oh, they didn't really have a plan when they started. Right, some that I'll pick on, like the Battlestar Galactica remake that they did a few years ago. Right, they even say like they have a plan, and you're like, no, they don't. Like, you don't have a plan, right? It's like in their intro, like there's 9 Cylons and they have a plan. Like, no, there's no plan, right? Like I can tell, and it's like the story was really good until it wasn't really good, right? And then of course, Game of Thrones, we could all argue about Game of Thrones having that thing where like it rolled and rolled and rolled and like all kinds of things, and you're like, wow, I'm totally into this, and then you're like, really? Like that's where you're going to end this thing? Right? That's how it worked out.
There's no argument. We're in agreement.
Right? Like that was a mess, right? Like, and there's production issues. Every so often it works out okay. The Expanse TV series managed to pull it off, right? Like they managed to have an entire series, and you could tell that they didn't know where they're going. They had actors that were kicked out and had to change the whole storylines. They have total story threads that never go anywhere. But the ending was actually still really good. They managed to kind of nail the ending. Breaking Bad, the same way, right? Like Breaking Bad, you have no idea where the show is going to go. The fun is watching this guy Forrest Gump his way through being a drug dealer, and then at the end, it's like everything kind of works out, and you're like, okay, like I'm actually okay with the ending that happened there. So. But it could be a trick with your RPG too, right? Like you kind of don't know where the ending is going to be. And I have players who come to me and they're like, how much longer do we have in the campaign? I'm like, I have no idea, right? Like, I don't know where it's going. Like, I don't know. It could be 3 sessions if you get killed, right? It could be, it could be another 4 months, depending on what you guys plan.
This is a great point, Mike, because a lot of the talk about campaign prep doesn't account for the fact that there are all sorts of different kinds of campaigns. I think there are two really big types of campaigns, where one is the one where the players expect to follow a story that the GM lays out for them, and they'll make small scale decisions, kind of like Baldur's Gate, right? There's all sorts of little decisions they can make but they will go from Act 1 to Act 2 to Act 3. But there are also plenty of games, and these are more old school games typically, but I think even in my games, which are more the former, they take aspects of the latter, which are just let the players do what they want, right? What are the players' own self-motivated stories, and how will the GM kind of react in real time? As a GM, I love to be surprised. I don't like feeling like I've got all the answers. It makes me feel kind of twitchy. It makes me feel like there's a lot of expectation on me to present a good show. And I like to support the players in what they want to self-directedly do more often than not.
The word agency is one that makes me feel a little twitchy. Because it's sort of like the term railroad. It's sort of like the term hex crawl.
Sure.
There's a meaning, and then there's a denotation, and there's a connotation. And the connotation for player agency, players or people that claim to advocate for players are always like, don't step on player agency. Don't step on player agency. But they give it more weight than I think it actually has. Because player agency to me is, you don't want to tell the player what their characters can or can't do to a point. You don't want to say, no, you can't attack the guard. But you can say, you can attack the guard, but then there will be consequences for that. So for me, stepping on player agency is saying, no, you cannot do that. Stepping on player agency isn't about taking the story where you as the game master see it going. So if you know that in Act 3 they're going to fight Strahd, no matter what they do, as long as you are letting the players have their story within your sandbox, Strahd can pop up anywhere. So that's not stepping on player agency. That's putting the story in front of the players. And I want to always make sure that we delineate that line between those two concepts.
I agree. I did a video a couple of weeks ago, kind of in advance of our organized play that we did at Gen Con, where I talked about the 3 adventures that were run as part of that organized play. These are the adventures. This is what they are. This is the story of each of them has an encapsulated story. Because of the style of campaign is an organized play, you have to tell a complete story in a 3 or 4 hour session at a convention. And so there's less flexibility like you can't just sandbox the players, because they have to have told a complete story, walk away from the table satisfied, and feel like they accomplished something and are ready to hear the next part of the story when they sit down at the next GM's table, and need to know that they've played up to a certain point before the story continues. And got a lot of pushback. The way I framed that video was like, you can do a full campaign in 4 sessions. Yeah, just plan like level 1 is first session, it's a one shot. Level 2 is a one shot. Level 3 is a one, and three one shots that lead towards a conclusion. And got a lot of pushback about like, this is just the definition of railroading, or you're just pushing them through like exactly 4 adventures in a string, and they don't have any agency and they can't go anywhere. And it's like, this is just a different style of campaign. It is more structured. And in theory, you can actually play those 3 adventures. Correct me if I'm wrong, Shawn, in terms of how they ended up. But the way I pitched it in the video was those first 3, you can kind of do them in any order. Yeah. So perhaps at the end of the first one, you present to the players, where do you want to go next? Their choices within the adventure will affect how the NPCs feel about them by the end of the adventure.
That reminds me of a great adventure Shawn Merwin wrote called Treasure of the Broken Horde for Adventures League Season 5.
Right. Extrapolate.
Oh, well, yeah. It's a single AL adventure designed to be a 1-hour intro to the AL organized play program, but there are 5 scenarios, so that whatever GMs were prepped to do the intro track had 5 different kind of adventure options that could be played independently of one another, but all focused around a broadly contained scenario. And so, there's one in which you're all looking for the horde of Tiamat that was lost at the end of the Tyranny of Dragons. And it's introducing the Giants plotline from the Storm King's Thunder series. And, your first level adventurers. So I remember when I played that, I ran into a bunch of giant badgers that nearly TPK'd us because the dice were hot on the GM side. And there was another where we wound up as we were in a cave. Maybe you correct me if I'm wrong on this, Shawn, but there was a hill giant that had been reduced to the size of a goblin that we had to deal with. I mean, they're really like cool, inventive scenarios, but they all sort of revolve around this central star of giants are returning and you are somehow caught in the middle of it because you are an adventurer out for lost treasure.
My wife has a great term that she uses, which she calls the yam-shaped campaign. And the yam-shaped campaign is one where you know where it's going to start and you know where it's going to end, but there's lots of different paths to get there in the end. And so it starts tight and then it expands out into something big and then gets narrows back again at the top. And that's one where you can still have these sort of general stories. It's headed a certain way, but there's lots of different potential paths that the characters can take to actually get to that end. And then some of the WotC adventures we've referred to as sausage link campaigns, where they have almost tier-based things where they start in a certain place, then they expand out, then they narrow back down to a certain spot, and you have sort of a big sort of tier-based climactic event. Then it expands back out and in and out, and so you might have 4 of those those sausage links for each of like the tiers that take place. And those are models that I've used in campaigns. I've written campaign outlines in books that I've written that kind of follow this, like there's these big events, but there's all these different paths that you can take.
Witcher Watch video game actually has a pretty good adventure structure, especially because a video game is a closed circuit thing, right? You play as a Witcher. You are making choices as Geralt. So it's not nearly as open as D&D. But in terms of feeling like your choices matter in that game, basically what it does is it has 3 acts. And the first act and the third act are in the same location, no matter kind of what happens. But the second act is completely different. Like you're not even in the same area, completely different quests, completely different NPCs you have access to, depending on a choice you make at the end of the first act. And then the attitudes and behaviors and fates of all the NPCs and the world state at the end of the third act is very different compared to what you did previously. And it kind of reminds me of the sausage chain structure that you were just mentioning, Mike, is that you can... James, you've described it as pools and streams adventure design before, where it's kind of like you have a pool, it's an encapsulated area where the party are adventuring and they're making choices within that area at the moment. But then they are going to have to go to another area that the GM has kind of thought about and prepped a bit. And there's lots of different things to choose to do there, but it's still a contained pool. And here are the streams that you can take to kind of access those to get down into them, which I really like it because it's open, but it's also structured. It's forward, but it's not narrow, if that makes sense. Sounds Like Adventure also asked a question in the chat a little while ago about what it actually looks like on the page. And it made me want to mention, similar to what you were saying before, Mike, in terms of having the overall goal, kill Strahd, and then all the other things that are happening kind of closer to the players, is I think for me at the moment in the experience I'm having in my campaign is maybe my overall goal honestly isn't well set up at the moment without going into it. But I think another problem that I'm having is that I haven't defined immediate goals for the party. So when you define your overall goal, kill Strahd, it's just making sure that players know what they're doing and how it is helping them move towards that overall goal and telling them like, these are your 3 options. Maybe there's a 4th option if you have an idea to tell me. But these are the 3 options, and this is how these 3 options are going to help you get to the overall goal. So you don't end up in that kind of swimmy place of they're just kind of doing stuff and going like, what? How has this helped? What are we doing? What's our goal again?
Yeah, I have a kind of a model that I kind of stole from Dragon of Icespire Peak, the D&D Essentials adventure that I call the 3-2-1 quest model. And the idea for that is like you put 3 quests in front of the characters. Those quests all have sort of a drive that's headed towards whatever your big goal is. I have a campaign where they're trying to destabilize the Dragon Empire. So whatever quests I put in front of them all have some kind of hook into how is this helping them destabilize the Dragon Empire? Is it giving them new weapons? Are they stealing gold from dragon hordes? What are they doing that's kind of going that direction? So you put 3 in front of them, they pick one of those, they go on it. When they come back, the other 2 are still there. They pick one of those and go on it. And when they come back, there's 3 new quests and the 3rd one is thrown out. So that way they have sort of the players get to decide which ones of these things do we actually want to go on and which one of these do we just not care about. And the general idea is if they've passed on it twice, they probably don't care about. Now, sometimes the players will be like, oh, we really did want to do that one. We just had these other two. And so you don't have to hang on too tightly. So, nope, you're done, right? You can't do it. You're like, no, we can feed it back in. But the nice thing is you don't end up with like the video game quest log with 97 quests that you didn't complete, right? Mm-hmm. So instead, you're sort of always filtering these out saying, hey, some other group took care of that one, or that time has passed, right? Or, you know, the situation that caused that quest to be a thing that you could take went away. But the nice thing about that model is it's still all headed in the same direction. You're just kind of bouncing back from quest to quest. But those quests can be very varied, right? They could be in total different parts of the world. They could be, you know, giving them access to things that they never would have had access to if they went on a different quest chain. So there's still lots of agency for the players. And like you say, if the players can sometimes come up with their own. And then you grab that and put it and make it one of the quests. Hey, you guys said you were interested in this one thing that you wanted to do. You know, going into hell to go get the 2 million gold you dropped in there. You want to go do that, right? So we're going to make that a new quest that you can work on, right? And but that model is one that I really like and kind of fits my style of like, don't overburden yourself with a giant, a giant network of all of the possible quests and all of the repercussions for those and how they boil up. You're like, nope, 3 quests. You do 2 of them. You throw one of them out. You know, it's a nice simple process.
And the good part about that is if you do have a player. I'm not going to call this player problematic. I'm going to call this player challenging. The player's challenging because you set up there's these 3 quests and they want to know who the mayor is and if they can romance them. Right. Well, you can still then just say, yes, you can go talk to the mayor. The mayor's eating at the inn and they're having veal and they're doing this and that and the other thing. Now the mayor, who I didn't even think of, is a servant of the dragons who are ruling, right? Where I'm going to keep putting that quest in front of you. It's not the same quest, but it's something that's going to lead you toward the North Star that we're always heading to. Yeah. You want to go out in the field and smell the wildflowers. Great wildflower smelling PC. You're out there smelling flowers. And guess what's also out there? The bumblebee dragon that doesn't like you smelling its flowers, and now it's going to attack you.
The Monument of Mott, which is holding the crypt where the ancient dragon hunters of yore used to be, and there's the weapon that you need in order to defeat the Dragon Empire.
And you know what? This structure that you're describing, Shawn, is really great because it does what essentially a TV show writer would do if they had to deal with actors that just wanted to run around anywhere, right? Because there are some people online who often complain about the quantum ogre, right? Is that it's the illusion of choice. You go anywhere you want, but there is this encounter right in the way. And yours is a little bit better than that because your encounter is always tailored to the thing that they went to go and do with the bumblebee dragon or whatsoever. But what it ultimately ends up doing is that it ensures that there's no wasted energy. Everything is in pursuit of something, not just, the ultimate goal, but something like fun and exciting for the entire table. Even if that one person's gone off all on their own, the rest of the people are not just sort of sitting on their hands. Oh, they're fighting in an arena battle that has no bearing on the story. Oh, they're just smelling the flowers. Nothing is happening. No, it's, oh my God, they've gone and gotten themselves in over their head. Now,
I've said this before, but I hate the quantum ogre. I hate people's criticism of it because I didn't
just
hear
made
the term.
stuff up.
Yeah. Yes. Like
how dare you?
I hadn't heard the term. I'd been playing the game for like 2 or 3 years before I even heard the term, and then I'd heard it a few times, like floating around the internet. And then I was like, what is a quantum ogre? And somebody explained it to me once. They're like, oh, you have an encounter, and then whichever way they turn, you put it in front of it. And I'm like, so it's a random encounter. Yeah. Is that just, it's just GM prep? Is that what you're saying to me?
Right.
I actually think, I've been thinking about this recently, a really great product would potentially be, we'll call it the Quantum Ogre, and it's just like 1-page mini adventures that in theory can just get dropped anywhere.
Yeah, there are a lot of products like that.
Right, there you go.
I hate to tell you, there's a lot of those. Yeah. I think Kobold Press, not to pitch a competitor, but like Kobold Press has the prepared series, right? They have a couple of these.
Right.
And the prepared series are like exactly that. They're like 1 or 2 page mini adventures that you can drop almost anywhere, right? And
this happened to me recently. Was my party are currently adventuring through Astoya, the midnight realm that is always in eternal night, and they're going down a river at the moment on like a barge. And I thought, you know what would be a cool random encounter is if they see a torch or a lantern in the distance and it's not shrouded, it's like really bright, which means it's not a local because Astoyans know to keep their torchlight low to avoid attracting monsters out of the darkness. So they're like, who is this? What's going on here? Turns out it's a boat of Valicans that have come from the far north. And what is that encounter going to be? I didn't know. It could be a fight where they end up kind of boat to boat fighting. It could be a trade where they get some rare like Valican material or magic items or something. It could be whatever. And then it has actually become the driving force. The presence of these Valicans in the Astoyan River has become the driving force of the current adventure, where they're looking for someone in Astoya, and the party now have to decide whether to protect that person or not. The point being, your quantum ogres can open doors that you weren't expecting in your adventure, depending on how your party interact with them. If you are going to create random encounters or quantum ogres that open doors that push the narrative forward, just knowing how it's going towards that big final goal so that the party don't become lost kind of bouncing between quantum ogres, so to speak. Like Shawn said, the bumblebee dragon that kind of ties back into the main narrative. Anyway, that being said, the cat has been seen. It is the end of the show.
Thanks,
Mike,
Kat.
where can folks find you if they aren't already watching your excellent...
Slyflirt.com. Go to that website, and all my other stuff is linked there.
Cool. Well, you can find us every Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Pacific, streaming on Ghostfire_official, twitch.tv/Ghostfire_official, or you can catch us on YouTube, which might be where you're watching us now. You can catch us on Spotify. You can catch us everywhere. Every week, you can give us the likes and the thumbs and the stars and the stuff that keep us going, that feed us. My name's been Ben Byrne, here with Shawn Merwin, James Hake, Mike Shea, and we will be back next week for another episode of the Eldritch Lorecast. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba-da-ba.
Well, we can't summon Dante, so what are we going to get if we ba-ba-da-ba? Is it going to be some... it's a bumblebee dragon. Oh, no.
It's a bumblebee dragon.